Welcome back, guys. I'm Gary with Automatic Door and Hardware. We're a manufacturer of commercial doors, automatic doors, and the parts and hardware that go with those doors. If you like learning about doors and hardware, then you've come to the right place. Each day we try to do 2 or 3 videos related to this. So please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Okay guys, so in today's video, we're going to explain how to replace a motor gearbox assembly in a Stanley Duraglide automatic door system. And to do this, I am going to ask for some information from my dad, who has decades of experience in automatic doors, and he goes by Gary Sr., and he's gonna lay out what to look for and how to replace this component.
Hi, I'm Gary Sr. Talking about today replacing the Stanley motor gearbox assembly. Stanley's actually used several different manufacturers of motors in their automatic sliding door throughout the years. And same with their gearboxes, they've used different types. One of the issues that could go on with a Stanley door would be, and the motor's bad, is when you turn the power on to the door and it's closed, it starts to move a little and then quits. And then if you kind of push it a little, it starts moving again. It's because the motor is wore out. There are a lot of different automatic door companies out, service companies, that will come out to look at your automatic sliding door. And if you do happen to have, just a little tip here, if the technician that's working on it doesn't have a multimeter, then I would recommend calling a different company that uses a multimeter. There's a lot of people out there that like to replace parts that don't need replacing, and they won't use an electric ohm meter to determine if that motor is bad or not. There are some simple steps that can be taken to check that motor without actually having an ohm meter. If you suspect the motor is bad, you can turn the power off to that automatic door and unplug the motor. It's a 3-pin plug, and you can take either some needle nose pliers when that motor is unplugged, and you're going to notice that there's going to be a green wire, which is a ground, and then a black and white wire. And if you take those needle nose pliers and shove them in on the black and white wire when it's unplugged, and I stress this, that it has to be unplugged so that you're looking at the plug holding it in your hand. It can't be plugged into the controller. You'll get shocked or blow the control up. But anyway, this simple test, you insert the needle nose pliers, or you could even use a piece of wire to connect between the black and the white wire. So you're essentially shorting the black and white wires together, and then take the door and push on it. If that door moves easily as that black and white wire is shorted, then that motor is shot. If you notice that when you touch the black and white wire and all of a sudden the door breaks hard and you have a hard time pushing on it, that motor could be good. Oftentimes you can shove the needle nose pliers in there and push that door all the way open, and as the door is sliding open, you may feel the door jump at times, where it all of a sudden becomes easier and then it goes back to being hard again. And you can do the same thing as it closes, as you're pushing it close. If you do feel it jump at all throughout the stroke of pushing it open or pushing it close, that motor is shot, and it can easily be replaced. And how you'd replace it would be that you'd, the motor is already unplugged on the 3-pin plug. Then you have a 4-pin plug connector that's for the revolution counter on the back of the motor. that has to be unplugged. And then you'll notice there are two 9/16" bolts that hold that motor gearbox to the header. And all you have to do is loosen those up and pull the bolts out while you're hanging on to the motor gearbox. And then you'll have to disconnect the belt off the drive pulley on that motor gearbox, and then take the new one and wrap the drive belt around it and put the bolts back in, lining up with the nuts that are in the back of that header that those bolts bolt into. Get them started, both of them, and then you can generally take that whole, as long as the bolts aren't tight yet, they're just, you know, threaded in 2 or 3 threads, and pull on that motor gearbox as hard as you can to pull against the belt to tighten it, and pull as hard as you can, and then lock them down. And that generally is a good way to do it and not have that belt over tensioned, and it's going to be tightened properly. That belt should not be like a guitar string, where when you pull on it that it's making a sound. It should have a little bit of play in it, so it's not over tightened. Anyway, then if you can't get it tight enough, then you're going to have to lock those 2 bolts down, and then go to the opposite side of that gearbox on the idler side, and there's 1 bolt that you'll see with a washer in a slotted bracket that you'll have to loosen that up, and then it'll require an Allen screw to turn, and which will in turn tighten that belt tension. Once you got that adjusted properly, then tighten that nut back down, and that belt should have some, it should be able to move up and down about 1 inch to be tensioned properly. Then after that's done, then you can plug your motor back in and plug your revolution counter back in. On a Stanley door, that motor wire should be separated from the revolution counter wire. And there should be, if it's not there, then you may want to get some adhesive tie downs and clean that header off good enough that adhesive will stick to it, and with a zip tie, and bundle up the wire and tie it down, because you don't want those wires getting snagged in the belt or caught on something and ripped out. You'll want to do the same thing with the revolution counter. You want to keep, as I said earlier, the revolution counter wire separated from the motor wire, or it could possibly cause interference problems. Once all that's done and the wires are securely put up there and everything's plugged in, then you should be able to pull those doors closed, turn the Stanley power switch on, and then that door should start opening slowly. Once it opens all the way up and you're standing away from it to not affect any of the sensors, then it should close. And it's going to close slow. Once it gets all the way in the closed position, then when you walk up to it, then it should operate normally with full speed, open, and it should take, it shouldn't be closing any faster than 1 foot per second. And then of course you want to look at other things up there too, to make sure all the wires are, because on a Stanley door, a lot of the wires people have taken and used duct tape to hold them down against the cover, and oftentimes on a Stanley door, it'll operate going one direction but not the other. And what I mean by that is, you can, as an example, you can exit the building but you can't come back in. And as you're walking up to the door, you see the light coming on the overhead sensor, but nothing happens. And oftentimes this is caused by poor routing of the sensor wire, And if you look carefully at that wire on the cover, on the hinge cover side, you'll see it goes up and over the belt. And if those belts aren't adjusted properly, it'll rub all the way through that cable that powers that sensor, thus creating an open wire because it rubbed through the wire, and then the sensor doesn't work anymore. But that is some of the things to look for when you're, especially if you're inside of the Stanley automatic door header. Always look to make sure that those wires are not rubbed through. Sometimes a little bit of rubbing on the outside plastic of the wire is fine, as long as it's not rubbed through and where it's destroying the wire inside. But though, if you do see that, you have to make sure that you put that wire with some tie downs and make sure that it's not in a position where it's going to be rubbed on the belt. That's very important on a Stanley slider, because oftentimes the repair people will come out, and where I've been out on, some other company's been out there and worked on it, and they say, oh yeah, the guy was just out there and replaced the sensor. Well, he didn't check that wire going to the sensor, and you can get it right out there immediately and find out that that wire's damn near rubbed through and causing the whole problem in the first place. That's just some of the things you can look for, though, when you're in there for preventative maintenance.
And another thing too, guys, if you open the door, if you open the header and you look at the wires, or you look around the gearbox and you see that it's all oily up there, that's another for sure sign that it's time to replace that motor gearbox. Unfortunately, a lot of times, you know, companies don't do what we call preventative maintenance, and you know, in terms of Stanley automatic doors, in our opinion, preventative maintenance includes making sure that you replace the top rollers and bottom guides at the minimum. And you know, if you do that, you open the header and you can visually inspect the components and see if there's oil leaking from the gearbox. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't do things like this, and what happens is the problem finally occurs and they look to open the header and oil is everywhere on the wires, just destroying the rollers, anything like that. So, you know, be sure to, I mean, just the visual inspection can take you a long ways in terms of finding components that should be replaced or have failed. So,
yeah, and oftentimes too, that gearbox itself could be leaking oil so bad that it will actually get into the electric motor and ruin it. And if caught early enough, a leaky gearbox can be replaced gearbox only, and you can keep the electric motor that's in there. But if it's gone too far, it'll gum that motor up and just ruin it altogether. It won't work anymore.
Yeah, yep. And you know, there's also too, you know, a rubber coupling that joins the DC motor and the gearbox that can be replaced as well. That's another component that can fail. But you know, another key thing to look for is if you hear sound, especially coming from the gearbox or the motor itself. If you're hearing excessive sound or excessive humming or something of that nature, it could be a sign that something's wrong with your motor gearbox.
Yeah, and a lot of those Stanley gearboxes, when they weren't assembled properly from the factory, I've even seen them where they didn't have any oil in them. And you can generally tell the door because it's making a really loud grinding sound. And it's not in the guides, it's coming straight from that gearbox. Well, that gearbox needs to be replaced because that grinding is ground up bearings in there making all kinds of noise, and eventually something like that could even kill your control box, which are very expensive to replace because it's overloading it, and eventually it burns it up.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. So these are things that you can look for to help diagnose if you need a new motor gearbox, or you could use this video obviously as a how-to installation of a Stanley motor gearbox. Now, with the Stanley motor gearbox, it is also worth mentioning, Stanley's such an old company. They've gone through a few models of controllers and a couple models of motors. So, you know, look at your motor. The motor plug itself is the same, but it's the encoder plug that varies, either a square type or a rectangular type. It doesn't, we have adapters either way, but when you purchase from us, you can, the product image on our website will show what type of encoder plug we offer, so be sure to match those up. We have motor gearboxes for both types, so we got you covered there, but that's just something to look out for, because if you order the wrong one, then you're going to need an adapter harness. That's why we mentioned this.
Yeah, and the latest model has a different revolution counter on it, and is not compatible with the older ones. So it's very important when replacing the motor gearbox assembly to pay attention to what type of control you have. If you're not sure, you can always snap a picture of it and send it to us, and we can steer you in the correct direction.
Yep, and that can be sent to sales@autodoorandhardware.com. We're happy to help. And all of our products, all of the replacement parts for Stanley automatic sliding doors and even swinging doors can be purchased on our website at autodoorandhardware.com. I hope this video helps you guys. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.